I want to begin by telling you something that may feel unusual when you first hear it. It may sound like a secret that has been hidden for centuries, but the truth is much simpler than that. What I am about to share with you is not new knowledge. It is something you have always known at the deepest level of your being. Something that has been quietly present inside you long before you learned language, long before you formed beliefs about the world. The reason it feels mysterious is not because it was taken away from you, but because most people are never guided to remember it. You see, from the moment you were born, you were taught to see yourself in a very specific way. You were told that you are a person living inside a large and complicated universe. You were told that the world exists outside of you and that you must struggle, plan, compete, and prove yourself in order to shape your life. Over time, this idea becomes so familiar that it begins to feel like absolute truth. But I want you to pause for a moment and look more closely at your own experience. Because when you do, something remarkable begins to appear. Think about this. Everything you have ever known about the world has arrived through your awareness. Every sound you hear, every image you see, every sensation in your body, every thought that moves through your mind appears inside the field of your consciousness. You never experience the world directly outside of awareness. Instead, you experience the world as it appears within awareness. This may seem like a small distinction at first, but it changes everything. Because the moment you realize that every experience appears within consciousness, you begin to see that consciousness is not a small part of the universe. It is the space in which the entire experience of the universe appears. Let me ask you something simple. Right now, you can notice your thoughts. You can observe ideas moving through your mind. Sometimes they are calm. Sometimes they are chaotic. Sometimes they are hopeful. Sometimes they are worried. But the fact that you can notice them tells you something very important. It tells you that you are not your thoughts. Thoughts appear and disappear, yet something within you remains constant enough to observe them. The same is true for emotions. Feelings rise and fall like waves. They may be strong for a moment, then they pass, yet the awareness that notices them remains steady. So if you are not your thoughts, and you are not your emotions, then who are you? The answer is both simple and profound. You are the awareness in which those thoughts and emotions appear. You are the silent observer behind the movement of the mind. And when you begin to recognize yourself as that awareness, your understanding of life begins to shift in a powerful way. Instead of seeing yourself as a small figure inside a giant universe, you start to see that your experience of the universe unfolds within your own consciousness. Many ancient teachers tried to explain this in different ways. Some spoke of it as the universal mind, others called it the field of awareness. But they were all pointing toward the same realization. Consciousness is not something you possess, it is what you are. And the life you experience is the movement of that consciousness exploring itself through your unique perspective. Imagine for a moment that you are dreaming at night. In the dream, you may see cities, landscapes, people, and events. The dream may feel real while you are inside it. You may even feel emotions about what is happening in that dream world. But when you wake up, you recognize something surprising. The entire dream world came from your own mind. The characters in the dream were expressions of your imagination. The places in the dream were formed from the same source. Everything that happened existed inside the consciousness of the dreamer. Now consider the possibility that your waking experience operates in a similar way, though in a much deeper and more mysterious form. The world you experience is not separate from consciousness. It is an expression of consciousness, and you are not separate from that process. You are consciousness experiencing itself through the perspective of a human life. This realization is what transforms the way you understand the law of attraction. Most people think of the law of attraction as a technique. They believe it is a tool that allows them to get what they want. They repeat affirmations, visualize outcomes, and try to control their thoughts in the hope that the universe will reward them. But the law of attraction is not a trick and it is not a strategy. It is the natural movement of consciousness expressing itself in form. Every thought you hold creates a ripple in the field of awareness. Every emotion you feel sends a signal into that field. Over time, those signals organize themselves into patterns, and those patterns appear as experiences in the physical world. This is why two people can live in the same environment yet experience completely different realities. Their internal states are different, so the reflection they encounter in life is different. Think of reality as a mirror that never lies. A mirror does not decide what to show you. It simply reflects the image placed before it. If you stand in front of a mirror with a smile, the mirror returns that smile. If you stand before it with tension, the mirror reflects tension. The mirror does not judge or evaluate. It simply reveals. Reality works in the same way. It reflects the dominant vibration of your inner state. This is why trying to force external change without inner transformation rarely works. Many people try to rearrange circumstances while their inner identity remains the same. They attempt to change the reflection without changing the source of the image. But once you understand that you are the awareness through which experience appears, you begin to see where true change begins. It begins in the way you recognize yourself. It begins in the state of consciousness you inhabit each day. When you see yourself as powerless, the mirror of life shows limitation. When you see yourself as worthy, the mirror begins to reveal opportunity. When you see yourself as separate from life, the world appears hostile or indifferent. But when you recognize that you are the awareness through which life expresses itself, something remarkable begins to happen. The struggle to control the world softens. Instead, you begin to shape experience by shifting the state of consciousness from which you live. This is the forgotten truth that many spiritual traditions try to communicate in symbols and stories. You are not here to chase power outside of yourself. You are here to remember that the power you seek has always been your own awareness. You are the observer and the creator, the witness and the participant, the dreamer and the dream. And the moment you begin to sense this truth, even faintly, the way you look at your life begins to change, because you start to see that your experiences are not random events happening to you. They are reflections appearing within the field of consciousness that you are. And once you understand that, the journey of transformation becomes something very different from what most people imagine. It is no longer about forcing life to obey your wishes. It becomes a process of remembering who you really are and allowing reality to reflect that recognition back to you. I want you to imagine something simple for a moment. Imagine that your entire life is standing in front of a mirror, not a normal mirror made of glass, but a perfect mirror that reflects every movement of your inner world. This mirror does not listen to what you say you want. It does not react to your wishes or your complaints. It simply reflects the state you are being. This is how reality truly works. Reality is not something random that happens to you. It is a mirror that responds to the vibration of your consciousness with astonishing precision. Many people spend years trying to change the reflection without realizing they are standing in front of a mirror. They try to force circumstances to change. They try to control people, manipulate situations, or chase opportunities. But the more they struggle with the reflection, the more confusing life becomes. Because the mirror does not change when you fight with it. The mirror changes when the image standing before it changes. This is the point where most people misunderstand the law of attraction. They believe the world responds to effort. In truth, the world responds to identity. Let me tell you a story that explains this clearly. A woman once stood in front of her mirror every morning repeating affirmations. She would say, "I am successful. I am abundant. My life is full of opportunity." Her words sounded confident, but something inside her remained unchanged. Beneath the surface, she still felt doubt. She still felt small. She still believed that success belonged to other people. And because of that inner state, her life did not change. Weeks passed, then months, and the reflection remained the same. Not because the mirror was broken, but because the identity standing before it had not shifted. One morning, something unusual happened. As she touched the mirror, the glass cracked slightly across its surface. For a brief moment she felt frustration, but then a realization arrived that changed everything. She understood that the problem had never been the mirror. The problem had been the image she carried about herself. She had been trying to convince the world to change while secretly believing she was not the person who could live that reality. The moment she recognized this, her approach to life changed completely. She stopped trying to force the reflection. Instead, she began changing the way she saw herself. This is where the real transformation begins for you. Because the world you see around you is not simply a physical environment, it is the visible surface of a deeper process. Your thoughts, your beliefs, and your emotional patterns are constantly shaping the way reality organizes itself around you. When you believe you are not enough, life finds ways to mirror that belief. When you believe opportunities are rare, you begin noticing evidence that confirms it. And when you quietly assume that life works in your favor, something remarkable begins to happen. The mirror reflects that assumption back to you. Think about how often you have seen this principle in action without realizing it. There are people who walk into a room and somehow opportunities seem to follow them. Conversations open doors, encounters turn into partnerships, ideas turn into results. At first glance, it appears as though these people are simply lucky, but if you look deeper, you notice something about their inner state. They carry a quiet certainty about themselves. They expect life to respond positively. That expectation becomes the image standing before the mirror, and reality reflects it back through circumstances. The same mechanism works in the opposite direction as well. A person who constantly expects rejection begins to notice signs of rejection everywhere. A person who secretly believes they will fail eventually encounters situations that confirm that belief. The mirror of reality does not judge whether the belief is helpful or harmful. It simply reflects the dominant identity that you hold within your consciousness. This is why two people can live in the same city, work in the same field, and still experience completely different lives. Their environments may be identical, but the image each person brings to the mirror is different. You may be wondering why this happens. The reason is that your mind is not simply observing the world, it is constantly interpreting it. Out of the thousands of possibilities that exist in every moment, your awareness selects the experiences that match your inner state. This selection happens so naturally that most people never notice it, yet it is happening all the time. Your beliefs act like a filter that highlights certain experiences and hides others. Over time, those selected experiences accumulate, creating the life story you call your reality. When you truly understand this, something powerful becomes clear. The key to transformation is not fighting the mirror. The key is becoming aware of the image you are presenting to it. When you shift your internal identity, the reflection must eventually shift as well. It may not happen instantly, but the process is inevitable because the mirror cannot do anything else. It is designed to reflect the state placed before it. This is why inner work is always more powerful than external struggle. When you cultivate a new sense of self, when you begin to feel worthy of the life you desire, when you quietly assume that good things belong in your experience, the mirror of reality begins adjusting around that identity. Opportunities appear where there were none before. Relationships begin to change. Even the way people respond to you shifts in subtle ways. None of this happens because you forced the world to obey you. It happens because the reflection is aligning with the image you now carry. So I want you to remember something very important. Every day you are standing in front of the mirror of reality. Whether you realize it or not, you are presenting an image to that mirror through the way you see yourself. The mirror does not lie. It simply reflects what it receives. When you understand this, the focus of your energy changes. Instead of chasing reflections, you begin shaping the identity that stands before the mirror. And once that identity shifts, the world you see begins to transform in ways that once seemed impossible. I want you to consider something very simple but very powerful. Many people believe that the universe responds to the words they speak. They believe that if they repeat the right affirmations, if they say the correct phrases with enough enthusiasm, reality will eventually respond and give them what they want. But if you look closely at your own experience, you will begin to notice that life does not react to words in the way most people expect. Life responds to something much deeper. It responds to the frequency you are emitting through your state of being. Imagine a radio sitting on a table. The radio can receive many different stations, but it will only play the one that matches the frequency it is tuned to. It does not matter how strongly you wish to hear another station. It does not matter how loudly you say the name of the station you want. If the dial is set to a different frequency, the radio will continue playing what it is tuned to. Reality works in a very similar way. Your consciousness is constantly broadcasting a frequency through your beliefs, your emotions, and your identity. The world around you then reflects the station you are tuned to. This is why someone can repeat the most beautiful affirmations every morning and still see no change in their life. Their words may say one thing, but their emotional state may be broadcasting something completely different. A person might say, "I am wealthy," but inside they feel anxious every time they think about money. Another person might say, "I am confident," yet their body tightens with doubt whenever they face a challenge. In those moments, the universe does not respond to the sentence being spoken. It responds to the energy beneath the sentence. The deeper vibration always carries more influence than the surface words. Let me tell you about a man who experienced this in a very clear way. Every morning he stood by the window of his apartment and repeated the same declarations he had learned from books about manifestation. He spoke about prosperity, success, and opportunity with perfect wording. On the surface, everything looked correct, but week after week his life remained the same. Opportunities passed him by. Financial stress continued. Eventually, he became frustrated and wondered why the universe seemed to ignore him. One morning, as he repeated his affirmations, he noticed something unexpected in his own body. While he spoke, the words "prosperity flows easily to me," his stomach tightened with worry. When he said, "I trust life to support me," a subtle feeling of fear moved through his chest. In that moment, he realized that two completely different messages were being sent at the same time. His mind was speaking confidence, but his nervous system was broadcasting doubt. The universe did not know which message to respond to. So it continued, reflecting the stronger frequency that had been present for years. This realization changed everything for him. Instead of focusing on repeating perfect phrases, he began paying attention to the feeling behind his words. He noticed how certain thoughts created contraction in his body, while other thoughts produced a sense of ease and openness. Slowly, he started practicing a different approach. Before speaking any affirmation, he would pause and allow himself to feel the emotional state that matched the words. When he spoke about prosperity, he imagined the calm relief of financial stability. When he spoke about opportunity, he allowed himself to feel the excitement of new possibilities already unfolding. Over time, something began to shift. The words he spoke were no longer empty declarations floating in the air. They became expressions of a genuine internal state, and once that alignment appeared, his external life started reflecting it in subtle ways. Conversations led to unexpected opportunities. Small financial improvements began appearing. None of these changes happened because the universe suddenly decided to reward him. They happened because his internal frequency had changed, and reality simply mirrored that new signal. You may have experienced something similar without realizing it. Think about the times when you walked into a room feeling confident and relaxed. People responded differently to you. Conversations flowed more easily. Doors seemed to open with less effort. Now think about a time when you felt anxious or uncertain. The same environment suddenly felt more difficult. Interactions became awkward. Situations seemed to resist you. In both cases, the external world did not fundamentally change. What changed was the frequency you carried into that environment, and the mirror of reality responded accordingly. This is why mastering your inner state is far more important than mastering specific techniques. Techniques can guide you, but the true creative force lies in the emotional tone of your consciousness. Your feelings are like the strings of a musical instrument. When they vibrate with clarity and coherence, the music of your life begins to organize itself in harmony. When they vibrate with tension and contradiction, the signal becomes distorted and the results appear inconsistent. So when you speak about your dreams, your goals, or your desires, I want you to remember something important. The universe is not listening to the poetry of your words. It is listening to the music of your being. If the music carries fear, the reflection will carry more reasons to feel fear. If the music carries trust, possibility, and quiet certainty, the mirror of reality will gradually organize experiences that match that frequency. This does not mean you must force yourself to feel positive all the time. Authentic alignment is never about pretending. It is about becoming aware of the emotional signals you are sending and gently guiding them toward the state that represents the life you want to experience. Over time, that inner harmony becomes your natural frequency, and once that happens, the world around you begins to reflect that harmony in ways that once seemed mysterious. So the next time you speak about the future you want to create, pause for a moment and notice the feeling behind your words. Ask yourself whether the emotion you carry matches the reality you are describing. Because the mirror of life does not follow language, it follows vibration. And when your vibration becomes aligned with the life you desire, the reflection cannot help but follow. I want to invite you to look a little deeper now, because once you begin to understand what truly shapes your experience, many of the ideas people hold about manifestation start to dissolve. People often talk about many different laws. They speak about the law of attraction, the law of vibration, the law of belief, the law of assumption. They study methods, rituals, affirmations, and techniques, hoping that one of these systems will finally unlock the life they desire. But behind all of these ideas, there is something far simpler and far more powerful. There is one principle that sits beneath every spiritual teaching and every manifestation method. That principle is awareness. Most people believe awareness is passive. They think awareness simply observes reality, like a camera recording what is happening in the world. But awareness is not passive at all. Awareness is the creative center from which experience emerges. What you become aware of, what you consistently recognize as real, begins to organize itself in your experience. It is not because the universe is granting requests or responding to demands. It is because awareness itself shapes the structure through which reality appears. Let me explain this in a simple way. Think about how your attention works. When you become aware of something, that thing suddenly seems to appear everywhere. You might hear about a new type of car for the first time, and suddenly you begin seeing that same car on the road every day. Before that moment, those cars were already there, but you did not notice them. The moment awareness recognized them, your perception of the world changed. What you became aware of moved into the foreground of your experience. This small example reveals something deeper about the nature of reality. Awareness directs what becomes visible in your life. There was once a woman who believed that prosperity could only come through luck or external signs. She filled her home with symbols meant to attract abundance. She wore charms and collected objects she believed would bring good fortune. Yet despite all these efforts, her life remained unchanged. One day she met an old teacher who quietly asked her a simple question. The teacher asked her what she truly believed about herself. At first she answered with confidence, saying she believed success was possible. But when she looked deeper, she discovered something hidden beneath her words. She realized that she had spent most of her life believing that success belonged to other people. That belief had become the foundation of her awareness. The teacher explained that the objects she carried were not the source of her results. Those tools could only help shift her awareness. If the inner recognition remained the same, the outer symbols would remain powerless. This realization changed her perspective. She stopped looking for power in objects and began observing the way she saw herself. Slowly, she practiced recognizing a different identity within her awareness. She allowed herself to feel what it meant to be someone who expected opportunity. As this recognition deepened, her life began to change in ways she had never experienced before. This story reveals something essential. The world you experience is shaped by what your awareness accepts as real. If your awareness repeatedly recognizes limitation, life organizes around that recognition. If your awareness begins recognizing possibility and worthiness, reality gradually rearranges itself to reflect that recognition. This process happens quietly and naturally because awareness acts like the blueprint through which experience takes form. Think about a child learning to walk across stepping stones in a stream. One child approaches the stones cautiously, doubting each step. The hesitation makes the movement awkward and uncertain. Another child moves with quiet confidence, trusting that the stones will support each step forward. The difference between the two is not the stones themselves. The difference is the awareness each child brings to the experience. The child who recognizes stability moves differently through the same environment. In the same way, your awareness determines how life unfolds before you. This is why spiritual teachings often emphasize recognition rather than effort. Recognition changes the way awareness organizes reality. Effort alone can never accomplish that. Effort tries to push against the mirror of life, while recognition changes the image that the mirror reflects. When awareness shifts, The reflection eventually follows. This is not a mystical reward. It is simply the natural response of reality to the state of consciousness that observes it. You may begin to notice how this principle operates in everyday situations. When you become aware of a possibility, it suddenly begins appearing in conversations, ideas, and opportunities around you. What once felt invisible now becomes obvious. It is not that the world suddenly changed overnight. It is that your awareness opened a doorway through which those possibilities could enter your experience. Awareness acts like a gatekeeper. What it recognizes becomes part of your life. What it ignores fades into the background. When you truly understand this, something powerful happens. You stop searching endlessly for new techniques. You stop believing that success depends on finding the perfect ritual or repeating the perfect affirmation. Instead, you begin focusing on the one element that truly shapes experience. You begin observing the patterns of awareness that define how you see yourself and the world. From that place, you gently guide your recognition toward the identity and reality you choose to experience. This shift may feel subtle at first, but its effects are profound. As your awareness begins to recognize new possibilities, your perception expands. Opportunities appear that once seemed impossible. Relationships change. Circumstances begin aligning in unexpected ways. None of this occurs through force. It occurs because awareness is the foundation from which every experience arises. When awareness changes, the structure of reality must eventually follow. So remember this as you move through your life. Beneath every method, beneath every teaching, beneath every technique lies one simple truth. Awareness is the principle behind all principles. What you recognize as real within your consciousness becomes the framework through which reality expresses itself. When you guide that awareness with clarity and intention, the world you experience begins to reflect that recognition in ways that once seemed beyond your reach. I want you to notice something that most people overlook every single day. Your emotions are not random reactions that happen without meaning. They are signals, precise signals that constantly tell you whether you are aligned with your deeper nature or moving away from it. Yet many people spend their lives trying to silence these signals instead of understanding them. They believe emotions are problems to control or obstacles to overcome. But when you begin to see them clearly, you realize that emotions are more like a compass, quietly pointing you toward the direction of your true path. Think about how a compass works when someone is traveling through unknown territory. The compass does not force the traveler to move in a certain direction. It simply reveals orientation. It shows where north is and where it is not. The traveler can still choose any direction they wish, but the compass provides guidance. Your emotional state works in exactly the same way. It constantly reveals whether your thoughts and beliefs are aligned with expansion or contraction, with trust or fear, with your authentic nature, or with a story that limits you. When you feel emotions such as peace, excitement, curiosity, or quiet confidence, something very important is happening within you. These feelings indicate that your awareness is moving in harmony with your deeper self. They show that the identity you are holding matches the direction your life is meant to unfold. In those moments, you may notice that decisions become easier. Ideas appear more naturally. Opportunities seem to arrive with less effort. This is not coincidence. It is the natural response of life when your internal state moves in alignment with your true nature. On the other hand, when you experience emotions like tension, frustration, anxiety, or heaviness, those feelings are not punishments. They are signals as well. They reveal that somewhere within your thinking there is a belief or assumption that conflicts with your deeper sense of possibility. Something inside you is holding on to a story that limits the natural flow of your life. Instead of seeing these emotions as enemies, you can begin to see them as guidance pointing you toward a place where awareness needs to shift. Let me share a simple story that illustrates this idea. There was once a woman who appeared to have everything that society considered successful. She had a respected career, financial stability, and a life that looked impressive from the outside. Yet every morning she woke up with a quiet feeling of emptiness that she could not explain. She tried to ignore it by working harder and achieving more. Each new accomplishment brought a brief moment of satisfaction, but the feeling returned again and again. One day she finally paused long enough to listen to that emotion instead of pushing it away. She asked herself a simple question. She asked whether the life she had built truly reflected what she wanted to experience. For the first time, she noticed that the path she had followed had been chosen to satisfy expectations rather than her own sense of purpose. That persistent feeling of emptiness had been acting like a compass all along. It had been pointing toward a direction she had been afraid to explore. Once she recognized this, her relationship with her emotions changed. Instead of trying to silence them, she began listening carefully to the information they carried. When she felt excitement about an idea, she followed that energy with curiosity. When she felt resistance in certain situations, she examined the beliefs that were creating that resistance. Slowly, her decisions began reflecting her authentic interests rather than the expectations she had inherited from others. As her internal state shifted, the structure of her life began shifting as well. This is how your emotional compass works for you. Every feeling contains information about the direction your consciousness is moving. Joy and enthusiasm indicate that your awareness is expanding into alignment with your deeper potential. Frustration and anxiety reveal that something in your thinking has become disconnected from that alignment. When you begin listening to these signals without judgment, they become powerful tools for self-awareness. Many people believe they must constantly maintain positive emotions in order to create the life they want. This belief often leads to frustration because emotions naturally change throughout the day. But the purpose of emotional awareness is not to force yourself into artificial positivity. The purpose is to recognize what your emotional state is telling you about your current thoughts and beliefs. When you understand this, you no longer fight your emotions. You learn from them. For example, when anxiety appears, you can gently ask what belief is creating that feeling. Perhaps a thought about failure is moving through your mind. Perhaps a story about not being ready or not being worthy has been repeated so often that it feels real. The moment you see that belief clearly, you gain the ability to question it. And once the belief changes, the emotional signal changes as well. The compass begins pointing in a different direction. Over time, you may notice something remarkable. As you become more attentive to your emotional signals, your life begins to feel less like a struggle and more like a process of guidance. Decisions become clearer because you are no longer relying only on logic or external approval. You are also listening to the internal signals that reveal whether a path leads toward expansion or contraction. The more you trust this inner compass, the more naturally your experiences begin aligning with the life you truly want to live. Opportunities that match your authentic interests appear more frequently. Relationships feel more supportive and meaningful. Even challenges begin to feel different because you understand that every emotional response carries information that can guide you toward deeper awareness. So the next time you notice a strong emotion moving through you, pause for a moment before reacting to it. Instead of labeling the feeling as good or bad, ask what direction it is pointing toward. Ask what belief or assumption is shaping that experience. In doing so, you transform your emotions from obstacles into guidance. They become the quiet compass that helps you navigate the landscape of your life with greater clarity and understanding. When you learn to read this compass, you realize that your emotions are not random waves moving through your mind. They are signals from the deeper intelligence within you. They are reminders that your life is not meant to be lived blindly. It is meant to be experienced with awareness, with curiosity, and with a growing sense of trust in the guidance that has always been present within you. I want you to look at something that many people misunderstand about themselves. From the time you were young, you may have been taught to be careful with your desires. You may have heard that wanting too much is selfish, that dreaming about abundance is unrealistic, that seeking more from life means you are ungrateful for what you already have. Over time, these ideas settle quietly in the mind and begin to shape the way you see your own aspirations. When a powerful desire appears inside you, instead of trusting it, you may question it, suppress it, or feel guilty for wanting it. But what if I told you that your deepest desires are not signs of selfishness at all? What if they are signals from the creative intelligence of life itself moving through you? Think about the natural world for a moment. A seed buried in the soil does not apologize for wanting to grow toward the sunlight. It does not hesitate or ask whether it deserves to become a tree. The impulse to grow exists inside the seed as part of its nature. That impulse is not separate from the intelligence of life that created the seed in the first place. In the same way, the desires that arise within your heart are not random wishes that appear without meaning. They are expressions of the same creative force that moves through every living thing. Life expands through desire. Without desire, there would be no growth, no creativity, no evolution. When you feel a strong longing to create something meaningful, to experience love, to explore your talents, or to live with abundance and freedom, that longing is not something you invented out of thin air. It is the movement of consciousness seeking new expression through your unique perspective. The universe is not separate from you. The intelligence that shapes galaxies and oceans is the same intelligence that breathes through your awareness. When that intelligence wants to experience a new possibility, it often appears as a desire within the human heart. There was once a woman who lived a quiet life, caring for everyone around her. She worked tirelessly for her family, her friends, and her community, always placing the needs of others before her own. Whenever she felt the faint stirrings of a dream inside her, she quickly pushed it aside. She believed that focusing on her own desires would make her selfish or irresponsible. Years passed, and those dreams remained unspoken, yet the feeling never completely disappeared. It returned again and again, sometimes as a quiet curiosity, sometimes as a sudden wave of inspiration. One evening, as she walked alone beneath the fading light of sunset, she realized something she had never considered before. The desire she had been suppressing was not demanding something from the world. It was inviting her to express something that already lived within her. The longing she felt was not about taking from others. It was about allowing a part of her own creativity to enter the world. When she finally allowed herself to follow that inspiration, she began developing a small project that reflected her true interests. What started as a simple idea gradually grew into something that helped and inspired many people around her. The very desire she once believed was selfish became the pathway through which she contributed more to the world than she ever had before. This story reveals a truth that many people overlook. Authentic desire rarely diminishes the world. Instead, it expands it. When you follow the impulses that arise from genuine inspiration, you naturally express your unique abilities. Those abilities create value for others because they bring something new into existence. The musician who feels the urge to compose music is not taking from the world by following that desire. The artist who feels compelled to paint, the entrepreneur who feels drawn to build something meaningful, the teacher who longs to share knowledge. All of these desires represent life seeking new forms of expression. The confusion begins when people mix genuine desire with the fear of not having enough. When desire becomes driven by comparison, competition, or the need to prove worth, it begins to feel heavy and exhausting. That kind of desire comes from insecurity rather than inspiration. But the deeper desires that emerge from curiosity, creativity, and joy carry a very different energy. They feel expansive rather than desperate. They feel like possibilities opening rather than demands being made. You can often recognize the difference by paying attention to how the desire feels in your body. True inspiration carries a sense of excitement and movement. It may even feel slightly frightening because it invites you to grow beyond your current identity. Yet beneath that uncertainty, there is usually a quiet sense of rightness. The desire feels alive. It pulls your awareness forward rather than pushing you through fear. This is the voice of the creative force within you guiding your expansion. Many of the greatest achievements in human history began with someone listening to a desire that others could not yet understand. Inventors imagined tools that did not exist. Writers envisioned stories that had never been told. Visionaries felt drawn toward possibilities that seemed unrealistic at the time. If those individuals had dismissed their desires as selfish or impractical, many of the ideas that shape our world today would never have appeared. Their willingness to trust the impulse of creativity allowed something new to enter the collective experience of humanity. So when a desire rises within you, instead of immediately judging it, pause and observe it with curiosity. Ask yourself whether the feeling carries the energy of inspiration or the tension of fear. If it comes from inspiration, it may be the universe inviting you to participate in the creation of something new. You do not need to force the outcome or control every step of the process. Simply acknowledging the desire and allowing it space within your awareness begins the process of manifestation. Remember that life itself moves through expansion. Just as rivers flow toward the ocean and plants reach toward the sun, consciousness moves toward new expressions of possibility. The desires you feel are part of that movement. They are not interruptions in the natural order. They are the signals that guide you toward the experiences you came here to explore. When you begin to see your desires in this way, they stop feeling like guilty secrets and start feeling like invitations. Invitations to participate in the ongoing creation of life itself. I want you to think about how most people try to change their lives. When they want something new, they usually begin by tightening their grip on every detail. They create plans, strategies, timelines, and endless lists of steps they believe must happen before their desire can appear. They watch the clock, measure progress, and constantly ask whether the result is getting closer or farther away. At first, this approach seems logical, because effort and control appear to create results in many areas of life. But when it comes to the deeper process of manifestation, something unexpected happens. The more tightly you try to control every outcome, the more resistance begins to appear. This resistance does not come from the universe refusing your desire. It comes from the state of tension created by the attempt to force reality into a specific shape. Control often carries a hidden message beneath it. That message quietly says that life cannot be trusted to unfold naturally, that you must personally manage every possibility in order for anything good to happen. When that belief becomes the emotional foundation of your actions, your energy begins to broadcast a frequency of anxiety rather than alignment. And reality, acting like the mirror it always is, reflects that tension back through circumstances that feel slow, difficult, or uncertain. Imagine holding a handful of sand in your palm. If your hand is relaxed, the sand rests gently in your grasp. But if you tighten your fingers and try to squeeze the sand tightly, it begins slipping through the spaces between them. The harder you squeeze, the faster it escapes. Manifestation works in a similar way. When you hold a desire with clarity and openness, it remains part of your awareness. But when you try to force it into existence through constant control, the energy around that desire becomes tight and unstable. There was once a woman who believed she could create the life she wanted only through perfect planning. She kept detailed journals describing exactly when and how every goal should unfold. Each morning she checked her progress carefully, comparing the events of her life with the timeline she had written months before. When things did not happen according to that schedule, frustration began to grow inside her. She believed she simply needed to work harder, plan more carefully, and push more strongly toward the future she imagined. Yet the harder she tried, the more exhausting the process became. One afternoon she met an elderly fisherman sitting beside a quiet river. The fisherman watched the water with calm patience, his fishing net resting loosely in his hands. Curious about his peaceful presence, the woman asked how long he had been waiting for fish to appear. The fisherman smiled gently and explained that he was not forcing the fish to arrive. He simply placed the net where the current moved naturally and allowed the river to do its work. If he pulled the net constantly or tried to chase the fish, the water would become disturbed and the fish would swim away. By allowing the current to carry the net, he worked with the flow of the river rather than against it. The woman listened carefully and realized how similar this was to the way she had been approaching her life. She had been trying to control every detail, pulling and adjusting the net of her plans again and again. In doing so, she had disturbed the natural flow that might have carried opportunities toward her. Inspired by the fisherman's insight, she decided to experiment with a different approach. Instead of constantly measuring progress and forcing outcomes, she focused on the feeling of the life she wanted to experience. She allowed herself to trust that the details would organize themselves in ways she could not fully predict. Over time, something remarkable happened. Without the constant pressure of control, her mind became calmer and her awareness more open. She began noticing possibilities she had previously overlooked. Conversations led to new connections. Ideas emerged that felt inspired rather than forced. Situations that once seemed complicated began resolving themselves through unexpected pathways. None of these changes required her to abandon action entirely. She still made decisions and took steps forward. But those actions now came from a state of trust rather than tension. This is the difference between forcing and allowing. Forcing attempts to dominate circumstances with effort driven by fear or urgency, allowing moves with the natural intelligence of life, responding to opportunities as they appear. When you release the need to control every outcome, you create space for solutions that your limited perspective might never have imagined. The universe contains an endless network of possibilities that extend far beyond any single plan. By loosening your grip, you invite those possibilities to participate in the unfolding of your experience. It is important to understand that releasing control does not mean abandoning your desires. It does not mean becoming passive or indifferent. You still hold a clear vision of what you want to experience. You still take inspired action when the moment calls for it. The difference is that your actions are guided by alignment rather than desperation. You trust that the path may reveal itself in stages rather than all at once. This trust changes the quality of your energy. Instead of broadcasting tension, you begin broadcasting openness and confidence. When this shift occurs, the mirror of reality begins reflecting that openness in surprising ways. Opportunities appear at the right moment. Timing feels more natural. Situations that once required great effort begin flowing with less resistance. You may even look back at earlier moments in your life and realize that many of the best experiences happened when you were not trying to control every detail. They arrived through a combination of intention and surrender, effort and trust. So the next time you feel yourself gripping tightly to the outcome of a situation, pause for a moment and notice the tension in that impulse. Ask yourself whether you are trying to control the river instead of learning to move with its current. Take a breath and allow the possibility that life might already be organizing circumstances in ways you cannot yet see. When you release the need to force reality into your preferred shape, you create the space in which manifestation can unfold with far greater elegance and ease. I want you to notice something about your imagination that most people never question. Many people believe imagination is only a form of entertainment for the mind. They think it is a place for fantasies, daydreams, and stories that have little connection to real life. Because of this belief, they often dismiss imagination as something childish or unrealistic. But if you look closely at the world around you, you will discover a very different truth. Every building you see, every invention that changed history, every piece of art that moved the human heart once existed only in the imagination of someone before it became real. This reveals something important about the nature of imagination. Imagination is not separate from reality. It is the bridge between the invisible world of possibility and the visible world of experience. Before anything appears in physical form, it must first appear within the field of consciousness as an idea, an image, or a vision. The mind becomes the space where possibility takes shape before it moves into the world as action and manifestation. Think about how this works in your own life. Every time you plan something, you imagine it first. When you think about visiting a new place, starting a project, or meeting someone important, your mind begins forming images of that experience. Those images guide your behavior and influence the choices you make. Without imagination, you would have no way to see beyond the present moment. You would simply react to circumstances without the ability to create something new. Imagination allows consciousness to explore possibilities before they become reality. There was once the village had never seen machines that could fly through the sky, and most people believed such a thing was impossible. Yet every evening the boy would sit outside watching birds glide through the air. As he observed their wings moving through the wind, he began imagining what it would feel like for humans to fly the same way. In his mind, he could see machines lifting from the ground and traveling across the sky. When he shared this idea with others, many laughed and told him that such dreams were foolish, but the images in his imagination remained strong. Years later, that same vision inspired the study and experiments that eventually made human flight possible. This story illustrates how imagination often appears before the world is ready to understand it. The invisible vision inside one mind becomes the seed from which new realities grow. At first, the idea exists only as a possibility. Over time, that possibility begins influencing actions, decisions, and innovations until the invisible becomes visible. Without imagination, the future would simply repeat the past. With imagination, the future becomes a space of creation. When you begin to understand this, you realize that imagination is not merely a mental game, It is one of the most powerful tools available to consciousness. Through imagination, you are able to experience a version of life before it physically appears. The feelings generated by that imagined experience begin shaping your beliefs and expectations. Those expectations influence the energy you bring into your daily actions. Gradually, the imagined possibility starts organizing itself into real circumstances. Many people accidentally use imagination in the opposite direction without realizing it. They imagine problems before they occur. They picture failure before trying something new. They replay old memories of disappointment and assume those outcomes will repeat themselves. In doing so, they use imagination to reinforce the very experiences they wish to avoid. The mind becomes filled with images of limitation, and those images influence the choices they make. The bridge between the invisible and the visible still operates, but it carries negative expectations instead of creative vision. When you become aware of this process, you gain the ability to guide your imagination consciously. Instead of allowing it to wander through fears and doubts, you begin directing it toward possibilities that expand your life. You imagine the feeling of success, the calm confidence of stability, the joy of meaningful relationships, the excitement of growth and discovery. These images do more than entertain your mind. They begin shaping your internal state. And as your internal state changes, the mirror of reality starts reflecting those changes back to you. Consider how athletes often train their minds before competing. Many of them visualize their movements, their timing, and the success of their performance long before stepping onto the field or into the arena. These mental rehearsals strengthen neural pathways and build confidence within the body. By the time the real event occurs, the athlete's mind already recognizes the experience as familiar. In a similar way, your imagination prepares your consciousness for the reality you wish to experience. This does not mean that imagination alone magically creates results without action. Instead, imagination influences the quality of the actions you take. When your mind repeatedly experiences a vision of possibility, your behavior begins aligning with that vision. Decisions feel more natural, opportunities become easier to recognize, and your confidence grows stronger. The invisible image gradually shapes the visible path you walk. It is also important to remember that imagination works most powerfully when it is connected with emotion. When you imagine something vividly and allow yourself to feel the reality of that experience, your mind begins accepting the possibility as natural rather than distant. The feeling creates a sense of familiarity, and that familiarity changes the way you move through life. What once seemed impossible starts to feel achievable because your consciousness has already explored the experience internally. So whenever you allow your imagination to explore new possibilities, remember that you are not escaping reality. You are participating in the process through which reality evolves. Imagination opens a doorway between the unseen and the seen. It allows consciousness to experiment with new forms of life before they take shape in the world. When you guide that creative faculty with awareness, it becomes one of the most powerful bridges you possess, connecting the invisible potential of your mind with the tangible experiences that appear in your life. I want to talk with you about something that many people misunderstand when they begin exploring the ideas of manifestation and inner transformation. You have probably heard countless times that gratitude is the key to abundance, that being thankful will attract more blessings into your life. This statement contains truth, but the way it is often practiced creates confusion. Many people try to force gratitude before they genuinely feel it. They repeat words of appreciation while their hearts remain tense or doubtful. They say thank you for things they do not truly believe are present in their lives. And because of this gap between words and feeling, gratitude becomes a performance instead of a real state of consciousness. Real gratitude is not a sentence you repeat. It is a recognition that arises naturally when awareness begins to see life differently. It is the quiet realization that even in moments of uncertainty there are still elements of support, beauty, and possibility present in your experience. When gratitude emerges from this recognition, it carries a very different energy. It does not feel like a task or a ritual. It feels like a natural response to the realization that life contains more gifts than the mind previously noticed. Imagine someone standing in a field during a cold winter day, repeating the words, "I am grateful for the warm sunlight," while the sky above remains gray and silent. The words may sound positive, but if the person does not truly feel warmth or appreciation, the statement remains empty. Gratitude cannot be manufactured by the mind alone. It must arise from genuine awareness. When gratitude becomes forced, it creates a subtle inner conflict, because the mind is trying to declare something that the heart does not yet recognize as real. There was once a man who heard that gratitude could transform his life. Determined to follow this advice, he began writing long lists of things he believed he should be grateful for. Every morning he wrote about wealth, success, and happiness that he hoped would appear in the future. Yet while writing these words, he often felt frustrated because his present circumstances seemed far from the reality he was describing. The practice felt like a duty rather than a source of joy. After several months, he began to question whether gratitude truly worked at all. One evening, while walking through a quiet park, he noticed something simple that he had never paid attention to before. A gentle breeze moved through the trees, and the sound of the leaves created a soft rhythm in the air. For the first time in a long while, he paused and allowed himself to feel the calmness of that moment. There was no effort to be grateful. There was no list to complete. There was only a brief awareness of the peace that existed in that simple experience. And unexpectedly, a genuine feeling of appreciation appeared inside him. This small moment changed the way he understood gratitude. He realized that gratitude did not require pretending that life was perfect. It only required noticing what was already present. The warmth of sunlight on the skin, the comfort of a quiet breath, the presence of people who care, the opportunity to learn and grow through experience. When he began focusing on these authentic moments of appreciation, his practice of gratitude became effortless. It no longer felt like a strategy to attract something in the future. It became a way of recognizing the value already existing in the present. As this awareness deepened, another interesting change began to occur. Because his attention shifted toward genuine appreciation, his mind started noticing more experiences that deserved that appreciation. Opportunities appeared where he once saw obstacles. Conversations became more meaningful. Even small successes began to feel significant. The external circumstances of his life did not change overnight, but his perception of those circumstances changed immediately. And because perception shapes experience, the direction of his life gradually began shifting as well. This is the hidden power of real gratitude. When you truly appreciate what exists in your life, you align your awareness with a frequency of abundance rather than lack. Gratitude tells your consciousness that something valuable is already present, and when awareness recognizes value, it naturally becomes open to receiving more of it. The universe does not respond to the words "thank you" alone. It responds to the emotional recognition behind those words. You may notice that genuine gratitude often arrives unexpectedly. It appears when you pause long enough to observe life without judgment. It appears when you realize that even in difficult moments there are lessons shaping your growth. Gratitude does not ignore challenges, but it understands that challenges themselves can contain seeds of transformation. This understanding allows appreciation to exist alongside uncertainty, rather than waiting for life to become perfect before feeling thankful. So when you practice gratitude, do not treat it as a performance meant to convince the universe to give you something. Instead, allow it to be a moment of awareness. Look around your life and notice what is already supporting you in ways you may have overlooked. Notice the breath moving through your body, the people who have crossed your path, the opportunities to learn from both success and failure. When gratitude arises from these authentic recognitions, it becomes a natural state rather than a forced exercise. And when gratitude becomes natural, it changes the way you move through life. Your mind becomes more attentive to possibility. Your heart becomes more open to connection. The mirror of reality begins reflecting the appreciation you carry within your awareness. Over time, you may look back and realize that the shift in your life did not begin with demanding more from the world. It began with noticing the quiet abundance that had been present all along, waiting for you to recognize it. I want you to pay attention to something that many people have experienced but rarely understand. At certain moments in life, events begin to line up in ways that feel almost too precise to be coincidence. You think about someone and suddenly that person contacts you. You search for an answer, and a conversation or a book appears that speaks directly to your question. You take a step toward a new direction and unexpected opportunities begin appearing one after another. Many people call these moments coincidences, but when they happen repeatedly, a deeper pattern becomes visible. These moments are what many people describe as synchronicities. Synchronicity is the experience of meaningful alignment between your inner state and the events unfolding around you. It is not magic in the sense of something supernatural happening outside the laws of reality. Instead, it reveals how closely your awareness is connected to the unfolding of your experience. When your thoughts, emotions, and intentions begin moving in harmony, life often responds by arranging circumstances that reflect that harmony. These moments feel surprising because they appear to arrive without effort, yet they are deeply connected to the state of consciousness you are holding. Think about how often this happens when you are deeply focused on something meaningful. You begin exploring a new idea or direction, and suddenly information related to that idea begins appearing everywhere. A conversation with a stranger reveals a helpful insight. An article you stumble upon contains exactly the perspective you needed. A person enters your life who shares knowledge or resources connected to your interest. At first, these events may feel random, but as they continue occurring, you begin noticing that they are connected to the direction of your awareness. There was once a man who had spent years working in a job that left him feeling uninspired. Every day felt repetitive and predictable. Yet somewhere inside him there was a quiet desire to explore a different path. A path connected to creativity and meaningful contribution. For a long time he ignored that feeling because the idea seemed uncertain and risky. One day, he finally allowed himself to imagine what it would feel like to follow that deeper interest. The moment he began exploring that possibility, something unusual started happening. Within a few days, he overheard a conversation about a project related to the exact field he had been thinking about. A week later, he met someone at a gathering who worked in that same area and offered advice about how to begin. Shortly after that, he discovered a course that provided the skills he needed to develop his idea further. Each event appeared unexpectedly, yet together they formed a clear pattern. It felt as though life itself was gently guiding him toward the path he had been quietly considering. This is the nature of synchronicity. It is not about controlling events through force. Instead, it reveals what happens when your inner direction becomes clear. Your awareness begins to focus on certain possibilities, and because of that focus, you become more sensitive to opportunities connected with those possibilities. At the same time, your energy influences the way you interact with people and situations. Conversations become more aligned with your interests. Decisions lead you toward environments where helpful connections can occur. Gradually, a chain of events unfolds that seems almost too perfect to be accidental. Carl Jung once described synchronicity as meaningful coincidence. The key word in that description is meaningful. Random coincidences happen every day, but synchronicity carries a sense of purpose that resonates with your inner state. When these moments appear, they often feel like quiet confirmations that you are moving in alignment with your path. They do not force you to make decisions, but they offer signals that you are connected with a larger pattern unfolding through your life. You may also notice that synchronicity tends to appear when your mind is calm and open rather than tense and controlling. When you are relaxed and attentive, you become more aware of subtle connections between events. When you are stressed or distracted, those same connections may occur without being noticed. The universe is constantly moving through patterns of possibility, but your awareness determines whether you recognize those patterns. This is why trust plays such an important role in the process of manifestation. When you trust that life is capable of guiding you, you become more receptive to the signs and opportunities appearing around you. Each synchronicity becomes like a small message reminding you that you are part of a larger flow of intelligence. The message is not always dramatic. Sometimes it arrives through a simple conversation, a timely idea, or a moment of insight that suddenly clarifies the next step forward. It is also important not to become obsessed with trying to force synchronicity to appear. The moment you begin demanding signs or interpreting every small event as proof of something, you move back into the state of control and tension that blocks natural alignment. Synchronicity arises most easily when your awareness is balanced between intention and openness. You know the direction you wish to explore, but you remain flexible about how the path will unfold. When you learn to recognize these moments without clinging to them, they become gentle reminders that your life is connected to a deeper intelligence than the thinking mind alone can perceive. Each alignment shows that reality is not as random as it sometimes appears. Your awareness participates in shaping the experiences that come into your life, And when that awareness moves in harmony with your authentic direction, the world around you begins reflecting that harmony through events that feel almost perfectly timed. So when synchronicities appear in your life, pause and acknowledge them with curiosity rather than disbelief. They are not commands that dictate your future, but they are signals that your consciousness and your environment are interacting in meaningful ways. The more present and aware you become, the easier it is to notice these connections and allow them to guide you gently forward. Over time, you may begin to see that life has been supporting your journey all along, weaving together people, ideas, and opportunities in ways that help you move toward the experiences you are ready to explore. I want you to look honestly at the way you speak to yourself when no one else is around. Not the words you say to other people, not the confident image you might show to the world, but the quiet dialogue that moves through your mind when you are alone with your thoughts. Because the way you treat yourself in that private space becomes the blueprint for how the world eventually treats you. Most people never realize how powerful this inner relationship is. They assume that the reactions they receive from others are determined by luck, personality, or circumstance. But if you observe closely, you will notice a deeper pattern. The world often mirrors the way you see yourself. Imagine walking into a room while carrying a quiet sense of self-respect and calm confidence. You do not need to prove anything to anyone. You simply know your value, and you feel comfortable being present. In that state, your posture changes, your voice becomes steady, and your attention remains relaxed. People around you often respond differently to this presence. Conversations become smoother. Others listen more carefully when you speak. Opportunities appear more naturally because your energy communicates that you expect to be treated with respect. None of this requires you to force authority or demand recognition. It happens because your internal relationship with yourself is being reflected outward. Now imagine the opposite situation. Someone walks into the same room carrying hidden self-doubt. Their mind quietly repeats thoughts of not being good enough or not belonging. Even if they try to appear confident on the surface, their body language and tone of voice often reveal tension. They may speak quickly, hesitate when expressing their ideas, or seek approval before trusting their own opinions. Without realizing it, they signal uncertainty to the people around them, and because reality functions like a mirror, others sometimes respond with the same uncertainty. Conversations become awkward. Opportunities pass quietly to someone else. The experience seems unfair, yet it reflects the inner story the person carries about themselves. This does not mean that other people consciously decide to treat you based on your internal thoughts. Most interactions happen far below the level of conscious awareness. Human beings constantly read subtle signals in body language, tone, and emotional presence. These signals are shaped by the way you feel about yourself. When you respect your own voice and value your own perspective, those signals communicate stability and clarity. When you doubt yourself or criticize yourself internally, those signals communicate hesitation and insecurity. The world simply responds to the message you are already sending. There was once a young artist who struggled to share her work with others. She loved creating paintings, and ideas flowed easily through her imagination. Yet every time she considered showing her art publicly, she felt a wave of hesitation. In her mind, she heard a quiet voice repeating that her work was not impressive enough. Because of that voice, she kept her paintings hidden in her small studio. When friends visited, she often minimized her talent, describing her work as simple experiments rather than meaningful creations. One day, an older mentor visited her studio and noticed the collection of paintings leaning against the wall. The mentor looked carefully at each piece and then asked a simple question. The question was not about technique or skill. Instead, the mentor asked how the artist felt about her own work. At first, the artist responded with modest explanations about how she still had much to learn, but the mentor gently pointed out something important. The way she spoke about her work revealed the way she spoke about herself. If she believed her creations were insignificant, others would unconsciously adopt the same belief. This conversation stayed in the artist's mind for many weeks. Slowly, she began changing the way she related to her own creativity. She stopped dismissing her ideas before giving them a chance to grow. When she looked at her paintings, she practiced acknowledging the effort and inspiration that had gone into them. She began speaking about her work with quiet appreciation instead of doubt. As her inner relationship with herself changed, her behavior changed as well. She started sharing her art with small groups of people, not to seek approval but simply to express what she loved creating. Over time, something interesting happened. The same people who once overlooked her work now responded with genuine interest. Invitations appeared for her to display her paintings in small galleries. Conversations with other artists became more collaborative and encouraging. None of these opportunities appeared because she suddenly became a different person. They appeared because the way she treated herself internally had shifted. The mirror of reality began reflecting that new relationship back to her. The same principle operates in every area of life. When you criticize yourself constantly, the world often seems to echo that criticism through challenging interactions and discouraging experiences. When you support yourself with patience and respect, the world gradually begins reflecting those qualities through more supportive circumstances. This does not mean that life becomes perfect or that difficulties disappear entirely. It simply means that your internal environment begins shaping the way you move through those experiences. So the next time you notice the quiet voice speaking in your mind, pause and listen carefully to what it is saying. Ask yourself whether that voice is encouraging your growth or limiting your potential. The relationship you build with yourself becomes the foundation for every relationship you have with the world around you. When you learn to treat yourself with the same respect and understanding you would offer to someone you care about, you change the signal you send into the mirror of reality. And over time, that mirror begins reflecting a world that responds to you in the same way you have learned to respond to yourself. I want you to think carefully about the way most people try to create abundance in their lives. From a very early age, many people are taught that abundance must be chased. They are told that success belongs to those who push harder, compete more aggressively, and constantly run after opportunities before someone else takes them. This idea becomes so deeply rooted that it begins to feel like the only way life can work. People wake up each day feeling as if they must chase their future, as if abundance is always somewhere ahead of them, always just out of reach. But when you observe life from a deeper perspective, you begin to notice something surprising. The moments when abundance truly enters your life often do not happen through desperate pursuit. They happen when you reach a state of allowing. Allowing does not mean doing nothing. It does not mean abandoning effort or responsibility. Allowing means releasing the internal tension that comes from believing you must force the universe to deliver what you desire. It means shifting from the state of chasing something you believe you lack into the state of recognizing that abundance can flow toward you when your awareness is open enough to receive it. The difference between chasing and allowing is subtle but powerful. Chasing is driven by the belief that what you want is far away and difficult to obtain. Allowing comes from the recognition that opportunities already exist around you, waiting for you to align with them. Imagine standing beside a flowing river. If you are thirsty, you could run along the riverbank, desperately trying to catch the water with your hands as it rushes past. You would exhaust yourself chasing something that is already present. But if you kneel beside the river and place a cup gently into the water, the river fills the cup effortlessly. The water was always there. The only difference was the way you approached it. Abundance works in a similar way. When you chase it with anxiety, you create friction that makes the process feel difficult. When you allow it with openness and trust, you position yourself to receive what is already moving through the current of life. There was once a man who believed that success required constant struggle. Every day he worked longer hours than anyone around him, convinced that more effort would eventually bring the abundance he desired. Yet despite his dedication, he always felt as if something was missing. Opportunities slipped through his fingers, and the more he tried to control every detail of his career, the more complicated his life became. One evening, after another exhausting day, he sat quietly and asked himself a question he had never considered before. What if the problem was not a lack of effort, but a lack of alignment? Over the following weeks, he began experimenting with a different way of approaching his work. Instead of pushing himself relentlessly, he focused on the parts of his work that genuinely inspired him. He allowed himself to slow down enough to notice ideas that once passed by unnoticed. He began having conversations without the hidden agenda of trying to impress or convince anyone. In those moments, he discovered something unexpected. The more relaxed and open he became, the more easily new opportunities appeared. A conversation led to a collaboration. A project that once seemed impossible suddenly became achievable through the support of others. The shift was not magical in the way people often imagine. It was simply the natural result of changing his internal state. When he stopped chasing success as if it were far away, his awareness opened to the abundance that already existed in his environment. By allowing himself to operate from curiosity and trust, rather than fear and urgency, he became more receptive to possibilities that had always been present. This principle can be seen in many areas of life. Think about the difference between someone who desperately tries to make friends and someone who approaches social situations with genuine openness. The person who chases approval often feels tense and guarded, which makes connection more difficult. The person who allows connection to develop naturally appears more relaxed and authentic. Because of that authenticity, people feel comfortable responding to them. The same dynamic appears in business, creativity, and even in personal growth. Abundance flows most easily when your state of consciousness is open rather than desperate. When you operate from allowing, you begin to trust that life is not something you must constantly force into submission. Instead, you begin participating in a larger flow of intelligence that connects people, ideas, and opportunities in ways that cannot always be predicted. This trust does not remove effort from your life. You still take action, make decisions, and pursue goals. The difference is that your actions come from inspiration rather than fear. You move forward because something within you feels aligned with the direction you are taking, not because you believe the future will disappear if you stop running for a moment. It is also important to understand that allowing requires patience. When you release the habit of chasing immediate results, you give reality time to organize circumstances in ways that may be more effective than your original expectations. Opportunities often develop through connections you cannot yet see. Ideas evolve through experiences that appear unrelated at first. By allowing the process to unfold, you remain open to the intelligence of life, guiding events beyond the limits of your current perspective. So when you think about abundance in your life, ask yourself whether you are chasing it or allowing it. Notice the emotional difference between the two states. Chasing feels tight, hurried, and anxious. Allowing feels open, attentive, and confident that the right opportunities will appear as you continue moving forward. When you shift into the state of allowing, you stop running after abundance as if it was separate from you. Instead, you recognize that abundance is already part of the living flow of reality, and your role is simply to remain open enough to receive it. I want you to notice something subtle about the way manifestation truly works. Many people believe that creating a new reality begins with images in the mind. They focus intensely on visualizing the house they want, the success they desire, or the future they imagine. They try to picture every detail as clearly as possible, believing that the clearer the image becomes, the closer the manifestation will be. Visualization can be helpful, but it is not the true source of creation. Behind every powerful image there is something far more important. That something is feeling. Feeling always comes before the image becomes real. Think about the experiences in your life that have felt the most vivid and meaningful. Those memories remain strong not because of the pictures in your mind alone, but because of the emotions connected to them. The joy of an achievement, the warmth of love, the excitement of discovery, the relief of overcoming a challenge. These feelings give life to the images stored in your memory. Without feeling, the image would fade quickly and lose its significance. The same principle applies when you are creating a future experience. It is not the image itself that shapes reality. It is the emotional state attached to that image. Imagine two people visualizing the same goal. Both of them picture a successful future. Both imagine the same outcome with similar details. Yet one of them feels calm confidence while imagining that future, while the other secretly feels doubt and pressure. Even though the images appear similar, the emotional frequencies behind them are completely different. Because of this difference, their experiences will unfold differently as well. The person who carries confidence begins acting with greater openness and trust, which invites opportunities to appear naturally. The person who carries doubt remains tense and uncertain, often missing the same opportunities even when they appear nearby. This is why many people struggle with visualization practices. They focus so intensely on the image that they forget to cultivate the emotional state that makes the image meaningful. They try to force themselves to see something clearly while their internal feelings remain disconnected from the vision. The mind may produce a picture, but the body does not yet believe the experience is possible. When this happens, the image remains a mental exercise instead of becoming a living signal that influences reality. There was once a young entrepreneur who spent hours each day visualizing success. He imagined the office he wanted, the business achievements he hoped to reach, and the recognition he dreamed of receiving. Yet after months of effort, he felt no closer to the life he had imagined. One evening, while speaking with a mentor, he described his frustration. The mentor listened carefully and then asked a simple question. Instead of asking what he was visualizing, the mentor asked how he felt while imagining that future. The young man paused for a moment before answering. He realized that while visualizing success, he often felt anxious about whether it would actually happen. He felt pressure to prove himself and fear that he might fail. In other words, the emotional signal he was sending into the world was not confidence, but tension. The mentor explained that the image of success was not enough. He needed to practice feeling the calm certainty that would exist if the success were already part of his life. This insight changed his approach completely. Instead of forcing detailed images, he began focusing on the feeling he wanted to experience. Each day, he spent a few moments imagining the quiet satisfaction of meaningful progress. He allowed himself to feel the steadiness of someone who trusts their direction. The images still appeared in his mind, but now they grew naturally from the emotional state he was cultivating. Over time, his behavior began reflecting that new state. He made decisions with greater clarity. He spoke about his ideas with confidence instead of hesitation. Opportunities that once felt intimidating now appeared as exciting possibilities. The shift did not happen because the images suddenly became more perfect. It happened because the feeling behind those images changed. Once the emotional foundation aligned with the vision, the outer world gradually began reflecting that alignment. Conversations opened new doors. Projects developed momentum. What once felt distant slowly began becoming real. You may notice this principle even in everyday experiences. When you feel joyful and relaxed, your perception of the world becomes more positive. Small opportunities become visible and interactions feel easier. When you feel stressed or discouraged, the same environment appears more difficult and restrictive. The external situation may not have changed at all, but your emotional state alters the way reality appears and responds to you. Feeling acts as the signal that shapes the pattern of experience. This does not mean you must control every emotion perfectly. Feelings naturally change throughout the day as you respond to different situations. The important thing is recognizing the emotional state you return to most often. That dominant feeling becomes the background frequency of your life. When you repeatedly practice the feeling of confidence, gratitude, or openness, those emotions begin shaping your expectations and behavior. The images that arise in your imagination then grow naturally from that foundation. So, when you think about the life you want to create, begin by asking yourself how that life would feel rather than only how it would look. Would it feel peaceful, exciting, secure, or deeply meaningful? Spend time allowing that feeling to grow within your awareness. Let the images appear naturally as reflections of that emotional state. When feeling leads the process, imagination becomes more powerful because it carries the energy of genuine belief. In this way, the bridge between imagination and manifestation becomes clear. Images guide your attention, but feelings guide your reality. The emotional state you cultivate today becomes the signal your consciousness sends into the mirror of life. When that signal matches the experience you wish to live, the images that once existed only in your mind begin moving steadily toward the world of visible form. I want you to think about the idea of luck for a moment. Most people believe luck is something mysterious and unpredictable. They say certain people are simply lucky while others seem to struggle no matter how hard they try. When something good happens unexpectedly, people often say it was pure chance, as if the event appeared randomly without any deeper pattern behind it. But when you observe life carefully, a different picture begins to emerge. What many people call luck is often the visible result of alignment. Alignment happens when your thoughts, emotions, expectations, and actions begin moving in the same direction. When this internal harmony appears, your awareness becomes clear and focused. You start noticing opportunities that once passed by unnoticed. You respond to situations with confidence instead of hesitation. Other people sense this clarity and respond to it naturally. Because of these shifts, events begin lining up in ways that appear fortunate from the outside. Yet what looks like luck is often the natural consequence of being internally aligned. Imagine two people walking through the same busy street filled with shops, conversations, and possibilities. The first person walks with uncertainty and distraction. Their mind is filled with doubts and worries about what might go wrong. Because their attention is scattered, they overlook many opportunities around them. They pass by a store window advertising exactly the service they need. They ignore a conversation happening nearby that could introduce them to someone helpful. At the end of the day, they conclude that nothing interesting ever happens in their life. Now imagine the second person walking down the same street with a sense of openness and curiosity. Their mind is calm and attentive. Because of this awareness, they notice details others overlook. They see the store window and step inside. They hear the conversation and choose to join it politely. A simple greeting leads to a new connection, which later develops into an opportunity that changes their direction completely. To an outside observer, this moment might appear lucky, but the difference did not come from chance alone. It came from the state of alignment that allowed the person to recognize and act on the possibilities around them. There was once a young man who constantly believed he had bad luck. Every business idea he attempted seemed to fail before it could grow. Whenever he saw others succeed, he assumed they were simply fortunate. One day, he met an experienced mentor who listened carefully to his story. Instead of offering complicated advice, the mentor asked him a simple question. The mentor asked how he felt inside each time he started a new project. The young man thought about this for a moment and admitted that he usually felt anxious before beginning anything new. He worried that the idea might fail and that people would judge him. Because of those fears, he rushed through decisions, avoided conversations that could challenge his thinking, and often abandoned projects too quickly. The mentor explained that what he called bad luck might actually be the result of inner misalignment. His actions were being guided by fear rather than clarity. As long as that internal conflict remained, the results of his efforts would continue reflecting it. Taking this insight seriously, the young man began changing the way he approached his work. Instead of rushing into projects while carrying doubt, he spent time aligning his thoughts and intentions. He clarified why each idea mattered to him and allowed himself to feel genuine excitement about the possibilities ahead. When challenges appeared, he responded with curiosity rather than panic. Slowly, his confidence grew stronger. Within a few years, people began describing him as a fortunate entrepreneur who seemed to encounter opportunities at the right moment. From the outside, his life appeared full of lucky breaks. Yet the truth was that his internal alignment had changed. Because his thoughts and emotions were no longer fighting each other, his attention became clearer and his actions more effective. Opportunities that had always existed became visible. Connections developed naturally. What others called luck was simply the result of a person who had learned to move through life with alignment instead of doubt. You may notice the same pattern in many areas of life. People who appear lucky in relationships often carry a genuine sense of self-worth that allows them to connect authentically with others. People who appear lucky in creative fields often follow their curiosity consistently enough to develop skills others overlook. People who appear lucky in business usually remain open to learning and collaboration rather than clinging to rigid expectations. In each case, the outer success reflects an inner state of harmony. This understanding does not mean every positive event is fully controlled by your mindset. Life contains many complex forces that interact in ways the human mind cannot completely predict. But your state of consciousness strongly influences how you interact with those forces. Alignment sharpens your perception and encourages actions that support growth. Misalignment clouds your perception and leads to decisions driven by fear or doubt. Over time, the difference between these two states becomes visible in the experiences you attract and recognize. So the next time you see someone described as lucky, pause and look deeper than the surface of the situation. Consider the possibility that what you are witnessing is not random fortune, but the natural result of alignment between a person's inner world and their outer actions. And when you think about your own life, ask whether your thoughts, feelings, and intentions are moving together in the same direction. Because when they are aligned, the world often begins to respond in ways that seem almost miraculous. In those moments, you may realize that luck was never something reserved for a few special people. It was simply the visible reflection of a consciousness moving in harmony with the opportunities already present in the flow of life. I want you to think about how often people feel frustrated with time. Many people believe that if something has not happened yet, it must mean something is wrong. They feel that their dreams are delayed, that their opportunities are late, that life should have unfolded faster than it has. Because of this belief, they spend a great deal of energy worrying about whether they are behind others or whether they have missed their chance. But when you step back and observe life with a wider perspective, you begin to see that growth and manifestation rarely follow the impatient rhythm of the human mind. Everything unfolds according to a deeper timing that cannot always be rushed. Look at the natural world and you will notice this principle everywhere. A seed does not become a tree the moment it touches the soil. First, it must remain hidden beneath the surface while roots quietly begin to grow. During that time, nothing visible appears above the ground. Someone who does not understand the process might believe that nothing is happening, yet beneath the soil an entire system is forming that will eventually support the life of the tree. Only after that invisible preparation is complete does the first small shoot appear above the surface. The same principle operates in your life. Many experiences that seem delayed are actually developing beneath the surface of your awareness. There was once a woman who dreamed of starting a project that could help people in her community. She imagined creating a place where knowledge and creativity could be shared freely. Yet each time she tried to begin, she encountered obstacles. Financial resources were not available. The right partners had not appeared. For several years, she wondered if the dream simply was not meant to happen. She felt as though time was slipping away while her idea remained only a vision in her mind. One day, while speaking with an older friend, she shared her frustration. The friend listened quietly and then asked her a question that changed her perspective. Instead of asking why the project had not begun yet, the friend asked what she had learned during the years she had been waiting. As she reflected on that question, she realized something surprising. During those years, she had developed new skills, met people who shared similar values, and gained experience that she did not have when the dream first appeared. Without realizing it, she had been preparing for the very project she wished to create. The time she believed was lost had actually been shaping her into the person capable of bringing the vision to life. Not long after that conversation, the opportunity she had been hoping for finally appeared. A space became available. Supportive partners joined her idea, and the project began growing steadily. When she looked back, she understood that if the opportunity had arrived earlier, she would not have been ready to guide it successfully. The years she once considered delays had been part of the process that made the outcome possible. This story reveals an important truth about timing. Your desires often appear before the circumstances that will support them. At first, this gap between vision and reality can feel frustrating. The mind wants immediate results because it believes that progress should always be visible. But life does not operate according to the impatience of the mind. Just as the seed must develop roots before it grows upward, your experiences must sometimes develop unseen foundations before they can appear clearly in the world. During these periods of preparation, you may feel as if nothing significant is happening. Yet beneath the surface, your awareness is learning, adapting, and connecting with opportunities that will eventually become visible. Skills develop quietly. Relationships form gradually. Insights emerge through experiences that once seemed unrelated. Each of these elements becomes part of the larger structure that supports the manifestation of your goals. When people do not understand this process, they often give up too early. They interpret temporary delays as permanent failure. They abandon their vision before the deeper timing of life has a chance to unfold. But those who learn to trust the rhythm of growth recognize that patience is not passive waiting. It is an active state of faith that the invisible work of life continues even when results are not yet visible. Think about the moments in your life when something meaningful finally arrived after a long period of uncertainty. When you look back at those experiences, you may notice that the timing often made sense only in hindsight. The people you met, the knowledge you gained, and the challenges you faced all played roles in preparing you for that moment. If any part of that preparation had been missing, the outcome might have been very different. What once felt like delay often reveals itself as perfect timing once the full picture becomes visible. Understanding this principle changes the way you experience waiting. Instead of seeing time as an obstacle, you begin seeing it as a partner in the process of creation. You continue taking action toward your goals, but you also allow space for life to arrange circumstances beyond your immediate control. You remain attentive to opportunities without demanding that they appear instantly. This balance between intention and patience creates a state of calm confidence that supports growth rather than resisting it. So when you feel that something important in your life is taking longer than expected, remember the quiet work happening beneath the surface. The roots of your future experiences may already be growing in ways you cannot yet see. Trust that the rhythm of life operates with a wisdom larger than the impatience of the moment. When the conditions are ready and the foundation is strong enough, what once seemed delayed will appear at exactly the right time. And when that moment arrives, you may realize that nothing was truly late. Everything simply unfolded according to the timing required for it to flourish fully. I want you to look at difficulties from a different perspective than the one most people are taught to see. When something in life becomes hard, when plans fail, when circumstances move in directions you did not expect, the first reaction of the human mind is often frustration. Many people believe that challenges are signs that something is going wrong. They interpret obstacles as proof that they have chosen the wrong path, or that the universe is somehow working against them. But if you observe life closely, you will begin to see that difficulties often serve a very different purpose. They act as tools that refine your desires and clarify what you truly want. Think about how the process of creation works in many fields. A sculptor does not begin with a finished statue. They begin with a rough block of stone. Through repeated adjustments, they slowly remove pieces that do not belong until the shape they envisioned becomes visible. The sculptor does not see each strike of the chisel as destruction. Each strike reveals more clearly what the final form is meant to be. In the same way, the challenges you encounter in life often remove assumptions and illusions that once surrounded your desires. They reveal the deeper intention hidden beneath your original ideas. There was once a young man who believed he knew exactly what he wanted from his career. From the moment he finished school, he pursued a specific profession because it seemed impressive and secure. For several years, he worked tirelessly to reach that goal. Yet along the way, he encountered repeated difficulties. Projects failed, partnerships dissolved, and opportunities seemed to collapse just as they began. At first, he interpreted these experiences as evidence that he lacked talent or luck. Each setback felt like a signal that he should give up entirely. One evening after another difficult day, he sat quietly reflecting on everything that had happened. For the first time, he asked himself a question he had avoided for years. He asked whether the goal he had been chasing truly reflected what he wanted, or whether it was simply an expectation he had adopted from others. As he explored that question honestly, he realized something surprising. The parts of his work that brought him energy were not the ones he had been pursuing most intensely. The moments that truly inspired him involved creativity and collaboration, while the career path he had chosen demanded rigid competition and constant pressure. The challenges he had experienced were not random punishments. They were signals pointing toward a deeper truth about his desires. The difficulties had gradually stripped away the illusion that success meant following a path that did not match his nature. Once he recognized this, his direction began to change. Instead of forcing himself into a role that drained his energy, he started exploring opportunities that allowed him to use his creativity and work with others in a more meaningful way. Within a few years, he found himself building a career that felt far more aligned with who he truly was. This story illustrates a pattern that appears again and again in life. Difficulties do not always mean that you are moving away from your purpose. Sometimes they appear because your original idea of what you wanted was incomplete. The contrast between what works and what does not work gradually sharpens your understanding of what truly matters to you. Each challenge becomes a form of feedback, revealing whether your actions are aligned with your deeper intentions or simply with habits and expectations you inherited from others. Think about how your own desires have evolved over time. Many people begin with goals that are influenced by what they see around them. They may pursue success because it looks impressive, wealth because it appears secure, or recognition because it promises validation. Yet as they move through life, they discover that certain achievements do not bring the fulfillment they expected. These moments of disappointment can feel painful, but they also refine the clarity of your desires. They reveal the difference between what you thought you wanted and what actually resonates with your deeper sense of purpose. Challenges also strengthen your ability to recognize meaningful opportunities. When something does not work, you gain information that was previously invisible. You learn what approaches are ineffective, What environments drain your energy? And what relationships do not support your growth? Each lesson becomes a guide that helps you move closer to the experiences that truly align with your values. Without those lessons, your desires might remain vague or misdirected. It is also important to understand that difficulties often develop qualities that support your future success. Patience, resilience, and creativity rarely grow in comfortable conditions. They grow through moments when you are required to adapt and rethink your approach. These qualities become part of the foundation that allows your refined desires to manifest more effectively later in life. What once appeared to be an obstacle may turn out to be preparation for opportunities that require exactly the strength you developed during challenging times. When you begin to see difficulties in this way, your relationship with them changes. Instead of reacting with immediate frustration, you become curious about what the experience might be revealing. You ask yourself what belief, assumption, or direction the situation is inviting you to reconsider. In doing so, you transform challenges from enemies into teachers. Each experience becomes a step that brings greater clarity to your intentions. This does not mean that difficulties are always comfortable or easy to accept. Growth often involves moments of uncertainty and adjustment. But when you trust that each challenge contains information that can guide your understanding, you move through those moments with greater awareness. Over time, you may look back and realize that the obstacles you once feared were actually shaping your path towards something more authentic than your original expectations. In this way, difficulties become part of the creative process of life. They refine your desires until what remains is the vision that truly belongs to you. And when your desires reach that level of clarity, the energy behind them becomes stronger and more focused. What once felt like confusion gradually transforms into direction. What once appeared as setbacks reveal themselves as the steps that guided you toward the life you were meant to create. I want you to think about the patterns that appear again and again in your life. Many people notice that certain experiences seem to repeat themselves in different forms. The faces may change, the locations may be different, the details may look new, yet the underlying situation feels strangely familiar. Someone may repeatedly encounter similar relationship conflicts. Another person may constantly face financial struggles even after changing jobs or environments. Others may find themselves returning to the same emotional frustrations, no matter how much they try to move forward. At first, these patterns can feel confusing or unfair. It may seem as though life is repeating the same lessons without explanation. But when you look deeper, you begin to see that these recurring experiences are not random. They often reflect what can be described as invisible agreements within your consciousness. An invisible agreement is a belief or expectation that has quietly become accepted as truth within your mind. Most of the time, these agreements are not formed intentionally. They grow slowly through repeated experiences, cultural messages, or early memories that shape the way you interpret the world. Over time, the belief becomes so familiar that you no longer question it. It becomes part of the framework through which you view reality. Once that agreement exists, your awareness begins organizing experiences that reflect it. The pattern continues not because the world is punishing you, but because your consciousness is unconsciously repeating the agreement it has accepted. Imagine someone who grew up hearing that success is always difficult and that life must involve constant struggle. As that idea settles into their awareness, it begins influencing the way they approach opportunities. When they start a new project, they may expect it to be exhausting before it even begins. Because of that expectation, they choose environments that reinforce struggle, or they abandon possibilities that appear too simple to be real. Over time, the person gathers evidence confirming the belief that life must be hard. The pattern repeats, not because success is impossible, but because an invisible agreement about struggle has been guiding their perception and choices. There was once a woman who repeatedly found herself in relationships that ended with the same emotional distance. At first, the situations looked different. The partners had different personalities and backgrounds. Yet after some time, each relationship began feeling familiar in the same disappointing way. She wondered why she continued meeting people who seemed unavailable or unwilling to connect deeply. Eventually, she began exploring her own beliefs about relationships. During this process, she remembered a message she had heard often while growing up. She had been told that love always leads to disappointment and that trusting others completely is dangerous. Without realizing it, she had formed an agreement with that idea. Even though she consciously desired meaningful connection, part of her awareness expected relationships to end in distance. Because of that expectation, she unconsciously attracted or chose partners who matched the pattern. When moments of closeness appeared, she sometimes withdrew slightly, protecting herself from the disappointment she believed was inevitable. The pattern repeated until she recognized the invisible agreement shaping her choices. Once she began questioning that belief, her experience of relationships gradually began changing as well. This example reveals how invisible agreements operate beneath the surface of everyday life. They influence what you notice, what you expect, and how you respond to opportunities. The mind constantly searches for evidence that supports the beliefs it already holds. When an agreement remains unexamined, it quietly organizes experiences that reinforce itself. In this way, repeating patterns become signals that something deeper in your awareness is asking to be understood. The moment you recognize a repeating pattern in your life, you gain an important opportunity. Instead of assuming the pattern is caused entirely by external circumstances, you can ask what belief might be sustaining it. This question is not meant to blame yourself for every difficulty. Life contains many factors beyond individual control, yet your interpretation of events and the expectations you carry play a powerful role in shaping your experiences. By examining those expectations, you can begin dissolving agreements that no longer serve you. One useful way to approach this process is through curiosity rather than judgment. When you notice a pattern repeating, ask yourself what assumption might be guiding your reactions. Perhaps you expect rejection before expressing your ideas. Perhaps you believe money is difficult to maintain. Perhaps you assume that opportunities always appear too late. Each of these assumptions acts like a quiet contract between your mind and your experience. As long as the agreement remains active, reality continues, reflecting it. Breaking an invisible agreement does not happen through force or denial. It happens through awareness. The moment you clearly see the belief behind a pattern, you begin loosening its influence. You may notice situations where the belief does not fully apply. You may experiment with responding differently when familiar circumstances appear. Gradually, the mind begins accepting new possibilities that were previously ignored. As the agreement weakens, the repeating pattern loses its foundation. This process often requires patience because beliefs formed over many years do not disappear instantly. Yet every moment of awareness creates space for change. When you replace unconscious agreements with conscious understanding, your perception of reality expands. Situations that once seemed inevitable become flexible. Opportunities appear that were previously hidden behind assumptions. The patterns that once defined your experience begin dissolving as new beliefs take their place. So, when you notice the same type of challenge appearing again in your life, pause before assuming that the world is working against you. Consider the possibility that the experience is revealing an invisible agreement waiting to be recognized. Within that recognition lies the power to change the direction of the pattern. By becoming aware of the beliefs shaping your expectations, you begin rewriting the agreements that define your reality. And as those agreements change, the patterns of your life begin transforming in ways that once seemed impossible. I want you to think about two areas of life that seem very different on the surface but follow the same invisible principle beneath it. Those two areas are money and relationships. Most people believe these experiences are controlled mainly by external circumstances. They think money appears through luck, economic conditions, or connections with the right people. They believe relationships depend on finding someone compatible or meeting the right person at the right time. These factors certainly play a role, but there is a deeper pattern operating behind them. Both money and relationships tend to mirror the frequency of your inner state. When I speak about frequency, I am referring to the emotional and psychological signal you consistently carry within your awareness. This signal is created by your beliefs about yourself, your expectations about life, and the way you feel when you think about certain experiences. Over time, this internal signal becomes the lens through which you interact with the world. It shapes the decisions you make, the risks you take, the conversations you initiate, and the opportunities you recognize. Because of this influence, your internal frequency gradually shapes the financial and relational experiences that appear in your life. Consider money first. Many people grow up hearing messages that money is difficult to obtain or that wealth belongs only to certain types of people. These ideas quietly form beliefs about what is possible. When someone carries the expectation that money is always scarce, their behavior begins reflecting that belief. They may hesitate to invest in opportunities that could expand their income. They might undervalue their skills or avoid asking for fair compensation because they assume resources are limited. Over time, these decisions reinforce the experience of financial struggle, which then strengthens the original belief. The cycle continues because the inner frequency of scarcity keeps guiding the outer actions. Now imagine someone who carries a different belief about money. Instead of seeing resources as permanently limited, they view money as a tool that flows through exchange and creativity. They expect opportunities to appear when they contribute value. Because of that expectation, they explore ideas more confidently and build relationships that support growth. When challenges arise, they look for solutions rather than assuming failure. Their actions naturally align with the belief that abundance is possible. As a result, the financial opportunities they encounter often appear greater, not because the universe favors them, but because their frequency encourages choices that expand possibility. The same principle operates within relationships. The way you feel about yourself strongly influences the types of connections you attract and maintain. If someone carries a deep sense of self-worth, they tend to interact with others from a place of confidence and openness. They communicate honestly, set healthy boundaries, and appreciate mutual respect. These qualities encourage relationships that reflect the same energy. People who resonate with that level of self-respect are naturally drawn into their life. On the other hand, if someone quietly believes they are not worthy of genuine love or respect, their interactions may reflect that belief even without conscious intention. They may tolerate behavior that diminishes their value because part of them expects that treatment. They might avoid expressing their needs because they fear rejection. Over time, these patterns attract relationships that mirror the same insecurity. Once again, the world simply reflects the internal frequency that has been established within their awareness. There was once a man who struggled with both money and relationships. For many years, he believed that success belonged to other people and that meaningful connections were difficult to maintain. Whenever he began a new job or relationship, he secretly expected it to fail. Because of that expectation, he approached situations cautiously and sometimes defensively. When difficulties appeared, he interpreted them as proof that his beliefs were correct. The pattern continued until one day he began examining the assumptions guiding his behavior. As he reflected on his past experiences, he realized that many of his decisions had been shaped by fear rather than trust. He had been expecting scarcity and disappointment before giving life a chance to prove otherwise. Slowly, he began practicing a different internal perspective. Instead of assuming limitation, he allowed himself to believe that value could flow through his work and that genuine connection could exist between people. This shift did not change his life instantly, but it gradually changed his actions. He spoke more confidently about his ideas, explored collaborations that once felt intimidating, and approached relationships with greater honesty. Over time, both his financial situation and his personal connections improved in ways that once seemed unlikely. The important lesson in this story is not that positive thinking magically creates money or perfect relationships. The deeper lesson is that your inner frequency influences how you interact with the world. That interaction shapes the experiences you gather over time. When your awareness holds the expectation of scarcity or rejection, your actions often reinforce those outcomes. When your awareness carries confidence and openness, your actions begin inviting opportunities that reflect those qualities. This understanding encourages a powerful shift in focus. Instead of constantly trying to control external circumstances, you begin paying attention to the internal state guiding your behavior. You ask yourself what beliefs you carry about wealth, connection, and personal value. You observe whether those beliefs create expansion or contraction in your life. Through this awareness, you gradually adjust the frequency you bring into each interaction. Money and relationships are not separate from your consciousness. They are expressions of how you move through the world. When your inner state aligns with trust, clarity, and self-respect, the experiences you encounter begin reflecting that alignment. Opportunities to exchange value appear more frequently, and connections with others become more authentic. In this way, the outer results you experience become the mirror of the frequency you have cultivated within yourself. I want you to understand something that many people overlook when they begin exploring the power of the mind and manifestation. Most people believe that success comes from moments of intense motivation. They wait for bursts of inspiration or powerful emotional states that make them feel unstoppable for a short period of time. During those moments, they imagine the life they want and promise themselves that everything will change. Yet after a few days or weeks, the excitement fades. Doubts return, and the energy they once felt begins to disappear. When this happens, many people assume the process does not work. In truth, the problem is not the absence of desire. The problem is the instability of belief. The true power behind manifestation does not come from emotional intensity that lasts for a moment. It comes from belief that remains steady over time. A belief that becomes stable in your awareness begins shaping the way you interpret every situation. It influences the choices you make, the risks you are willing to take, and the persistence you show when challenges appear. Over time, that steady belief creates a consistent signal within your consciousness, and that signal gradually organizes the experiences that appear in your life. Think about how a river shapes the land it flows through. The river does not carve valleys through a single powerful surge of water. It shapes the earth through continuous movement over long periods of time. Day after day, the water flows along the same path, slowly deepening the channel through which it travels. Eventually, the landscape itself begins reflecting the path the river has created. Your beliefs work in a similar way. A belief that remains stable becomes the channel through which your thoughts, emotions, and actions consistently move. Over time, the structure of your life begins reflecting that pattern. There was once a woman who dreamed of becoming a writer. She loved stories and spent many evenings imagining the books she wished to create. At times, she felt intense excitement about her ideas. During those moments, she wrote with passion and confidence, yet those moments were followed by long periods of doubt. She would question whether anyone would read her work or whether her talent was strong enough to succeed. Because her belief changed frequently, she often stopped writing for weeks at a time. Each pause weakened the momentum she had built. One day, she attended a small workshop led by an experienced author. During the conversation, someone asked what separated successful writers from those who never finished their work. The author did not speak about talent or inspiration. Instead, he explained that the most important difference was consistency of belief. Writers who succeed are not always the most confident or the most brilliant. They are the ones who continue believing in the value of their work long enough to complete it. Their belief may not feel powerful every day, but it remains steady enough to guide their actions, even during moments of uncertainty. The woman reflected deeply on those words. She realized that her problem was not lack of creativity. Her problem was allowing doubt to interrupt the belief that had inspired her in the first place. From that moment, she decided to approach her dream differently. Instead of waiting for intense motivation, she focused on maintaining a quiet, steady belief in the importance of her writing. She committed to writing regularly, even when the process felt slow or imperfect. As weeks turned into months, her belief became stronger because it was supported by consistent action. Eventually, the book she had imagined for years was finally completed. This story illustrates the difference between emotional excitement and stable belief. Excitement can ignite the beginning of a vision, but belief sustains the journey that follows. When belief remains consistent, it creates resilience. Challenges no longer appear as signals to stop, but as obstacles that can be navigated with patience. Opportunities that once seemed uncertain become invitations to continue moving forward. The stability of belief gradually builds momentum that carries your vision into reality. You may notice this principle in many areas of life. Athletes who achieve excellence do not rely on occasional bursts of confidence. They cultivate belief in their ability through daily practice and persistence. Entrepreneurs who build successful ventures rarely experience uninterrupted certainty, yet their belief in the value of their work remains strong enough to guide them through setbacks. In relationships as well, trust grows not from dramatic declarations but from steady actions that demonstrate commitment over time. In each of these examples, stability creates strength. Belief becomes stable when it is supported by awareness and repetition. Each time you return to a vision that resonates with your deeper values, you reinforce the signal that vision sends into your consciousness. Doubt may still appear occasionally, but it no longer controls your direction. You acknowledge uncertainty while continuing to act from the belief that your path has meaning. Over time, this steady orientation becomes the foundation of your identity. It is important to remember that stable belief does not require absolute certainty. No human mind remains completely free of questions or hesitation. Stability simply means that your core direction remains consistent even when temporary doubts arise. You may experience moments of uncertainty, yet your underlying belief continues guiding your choices. This quiet persistence creates the environment where manifestation can develop naturally. So, when you think about the life you want to create, do not focus only on moments of intense motivation. Instead, ask yourself whether your belief in that vision can remain steady over time. Can you return to that belief again and again, even when progress appears slow? Can you allow that belief to shape your actions in small but consistent ways? Because the power that transforms ideas into reality rarely appears through sudden bursts of energy. It emerges through the quiet strength of belief that continues flowing like a river, shaping the landscape of your life through its steady and unwavering presence. I want you to notice something about the way most people think about their lives. Many people spend a great deal of time living either in memories of the past or in expectations of the future. They replay moments that already happened, sometimes wishing they could change them, sometimes carrying regret or disappointment that continues to shape the way they see themselves. At the same time, they imagine a future where everything will finally improve. They say that one day things will be different. One day they will feel confident. One day they will live the life they truly want. Yet while they think about yesterday and tomorrow, they often overlook the only moment where real creation can occur. That moment is the present. The present moment is the only place where your awareness has the power to shape experience. The past exists as memory and interpretation within your mind. The future exists as imagination and possibility. But the present is the point where consciousness meets action, where belief meets behavior, and where imagination begins to influence reality. Every transformation you have ever experienced began in a present moment when a new awareness appeared and guided a new decision. Think about a simple example. Imagine someone who has spent years believing they are not capable of achieving their dreams. That belief may have been reinforced by many experiences in the past. They may remember moments of failure or criticism that seem to confirm the idea that success was not meant for them. If they continue focusing on those memories, the past will appear to define their future. Yet the moment they recognize that belief as only a story formed by previous experiences, something changes. In the present moment, they gain the freedom to choose a different interpretation of who they are becoming. This does not erase the past, but it changes the power the past has over the present. The past becomes information rather than identity. From this new awareness, the person can take a small action that reflects the possibility of a different future. That action may appear simple, perhaps speaking about an idea they once kept hidden or taking the first step toward a goal they previously avoided. Yet that action begins shaping a new direction because it occurs in the present moment where creative power exists. There was once a man who constantly delayed pursuing the life he wanted. He believed that the right moment had not yet arrived. Each year he told himself that he would begin next year when conditions were better. He imagined a future version of himself who would be more confident, more prepared, and more certain about what to do. Yet that future never seemed to arrive because the decision to begin was always postponed. One evening while walking home, he noticed an elderly musician playing quietly on a street corner. The musician appeared peaceful, focused only on the music flowing from his instrument. Curious about his calm presence, the man asked how long he had been playing. The musician smiled and explained that he had started learning music late in life after many years of postponing his dream. When asked what finally changed his mind, the musician answered with a simple observation. He realized that the perfect moment he was waiting for would never arrive, because the only moment that truly exists is the one he was living in right then. Those words stayed with the man for many days. Gradually, he recognized how often he had been postponing life by imagining a future where he would finally be ready. In truth, readiness does not appear in some distant tomorrow. It appears when awareness recognizes that the present moment already contains the possibility of change. The decision to begin always happens now, not later. When you understand this principle, your relationship with time begins to change. Instead of waiting for the future to deliver the life you want, you begin shaping that life through the choices you make today. Each thought you choose, each belief you reinforce, and each action you take becomes part of the creative process unfolding in the present. The future becomes the natural extension of the state of consciousness you cultivate now. This perspective also brings a sense of freedom. If creative power exists in the present moment, then no past experience permanently limits your potential. Every moment offers the opportunity to shift your awareness slightly in a new direction. The shift may seem small at first, but repeated moments of conscious choice gradually build momentum. Over time, those moments form the foundation of a completely different future. You may also notice that living in the present brings clarity. When attention is focused on what is happening now, distractions created by worry and regret begin to lose their influence. Your mind becomes more aware of opportunities available in this moment rather than hypothetical possibilities in some distant future. Decisions become simpler because they are based on direct experience instead of endless speculation. The present moment is where intention meets reality. It is where imagination transforms into action and where belief becomes behavior. Each time you bring your awareness back to this moment, you reconnect with the source of your creative power. The future you are hoping for does not exist somewhere ahead of you waiting to be discovered. It grows out of the choices you make now, one moment at a time. So when you think about the life you want to create, remember that it does not begin in the future. It begins in the present moment where your awareness has the ability to guide your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. By learning to recognize the power of now, you step into the place where transformation truly occurs. The present is not simply a passing moment between the past and the future. It is the living point where the story of your life is continually being written. I want to bring you to the final idea that quietly sits behind everything we have explored together. Throughout this journey, we have spoken about awareness, belief, emotion, imagination, alignment, and the way your inner state shapes the experiences that appear in your life. Many people hear these ideas and reach a conclusion that seems logical at first. They begin to believe that they are personally responsible for creating every detail of reality. They imagine themselves as individuals standing in front of the universe, trying to control it with their thoughts and intentions. But this interpretation still contains a subtle misunderstanding. The deeper truth is not that you are a small person creating reality from the outside. The deeper truth is that you are part of the very consciousness through which reality expresses itself. Think about the difference between those two perspectives. If you believe you are a person trying to create reality, you may feel constant pressure to control every thought and emotion. You might worry that a moment of doubt could destroy everything you have been trying to manifest. You may feel as though you must manage the universe carefully so that life unfolds exactly as you want it to. That belief turns manifestation into a stressful responsibility. Yet the truth is far more liberating. You are not separate from the intelligence that shapes existence. You are an expression of that intelligence experiencing life through your awareness. Imagine standing beside the ocean and watching the waves move across the surface of the water. Each wave appears unique. Some are large and powerful. Others are gentle and quiet. For a moment you might think each wave is separate, existing independently from the others. But when you look deeper, you realize that every wave is simply a movement of the same ocean. The wave does not create the ocean, and the ocean does not exist without its waves. They are part of the same living process. In a similar way, your consciousness is not separate from the larger field of awareness that shapes reality. You are a unique expression of that field, experiencing life from your own perspective. This understanding changes the way you relate to manifestation. Instead of trying to force reality into a specific shape, you begin participating in the creative flow of consciousness itself. Your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs still influence your experience because they guide how this creative energy moves through your life. But you no longer feel the need to control every detail. You recognize that the same intelligence guiding the movement of galaxies and the growth of forests is also guiding the unfolding of your experiences. There was once a man who spent many years studying different methods of manifestation. He read countless books and practiced many techniques designed to shape his reality. For a long time, he believed that if he controlled his thoughts perfectly, he would be able to design every event in his life. Yet the more he tried to manage every detail, the more exhausted he became. Life began to feel like a constant struggle between what he wanted and what actually happened. One day he met an old teacher who listened carefully to his story. Instead of teaching him another technique, the teacher asked him to consider a simple idea. The teacher suggested that he stop thinking of himself as someone who must control reality and start seeing himself as part of the consciousness that naturally expresses reality. At first, the idea seemed confusing, but as the man reflected on it, he began to notice how life had often guided him toward experiences he could not have planned alone. Certain opportunities appeared at the perfect moment. Certain challenges had shaped his understanding in ways he could not have predicted. Gradually, he realized that life had been collaborating with him all along. His thoughts and intentions influenced the direction of his journey. But the larger intelligence of existence organized countless details beyond his awareness. When he stopped trying to control every outcome, he began trusting that this intelligence was working through him rather than against him. His role was not to force the universe to obey his plans. His role was to remain aware enough to cooperate with the flow of creation unfolding through his life. This shift brought a deep sense of freedom. Instead of feeling responsible for manufacturing every result, he began focusing on the quality of his awareness. He cultivated clarity in his beliefs, openness in his emotions, and trust in the unfolding of events. When opportunities appeared, he acted with intention. When challenges emerged, he treated them as guidance rather than failure. In this way, he discovered that life was not something he had to conquer. It was something he could participate in consciously. This is the final understanding I want to leave with you. You are not a small mind trying to control an enormous universe. You are a living expression of the same consciousness that shapes the universe itself. Your thoughts influence the direction of your experience, but the deeper intelligence of existence carries the process far beyond what your individual mind could design alone. When you recognize this truth, the struggle to control reality begins to dissolve. You start seeing yourself not as a separate creator standing outside life, but as a participant within its endless creativity. The desires that arise within you become signals of new experiences seeking expression. The opportunities you encounter become invitations to explore those possibilities. The challenges you face become moments that deepen your understanding. Through all of these experiences, consciousness continues discovering itself through the unique perspective that is you. And when you finally understand this, something remarkable happens. The need to chase life disappears because you realize you were never separate from it. The universe was not waiting somewhere outside you to grant your wishes. It has always been expressing itself through your awareness, through your choices, through every moment of curiosity and growth that shapes your journey. In that realization, you discover the quiet truth that was present from the very beginning. You were never trying to create reality. Reality has always been creating itself through you.